Welcome, everyone, to our special council meeting of Tuesday, November 28th. Dean, call to order, please.
A mover and a seconder, please.
Brian and Wendy.
Moved by Councillor Ugly, second by Councillor Hewitt, that the special council meeting of November 28th, 2023 be called to order at 3:05.
All in favor? Carried. Roll call.
Okay, well, so I forgot to bring that sheet, so I'll roll call. Mayor Bennett.
Present.
Reeve Watt.
Present.
Councillor Ugly.
Present.
Councillor Hewitt.
Present.
Councillor King.
Present.
Councillor Gauthier.
Present.
Councillor Wren. All members present except for Councillor Wren.
Okay, thank you. Confirmation of the agenda.
Mover and seconder.
Betty and Jennifer.
Moved by Councillor King, second by Councillor Gauthier, that the agenda of the special council meeting of November 28th, 2023 be approved as presented.
All in favor? Carried. Remind Fire Chief Tim that you can't vote on it, Tim.
No. Yeah.
Declaration of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Budget, I'll turn it over to Sean. And I'll ask council today, when you have questions, just go directly to Sean. Don't look at me, just go to Sean for your questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I first want to thank the staff that's here tonight or today to take time out of their day, and especially probably time of their evening as this goes on a little bit to be here. I think it's important that, you know, I won't be able to answer questions as it relates to their day-to-day operation. So certainly, as the mayor said, when there are questions, you can direct them at me and then I'll delegate them over to the appropriate staff members. But, you know, as a treasurer, ultimately, I guess, for the municipal act, responsible for the financial affairs, but really it's the managers and supervisors that know their departments in and out. So I don't think it'd be fair that I would speak on their behalf for their budgets. I'll present the high level and then likely turn it over to them when questions arise. So here today, we're looking at the waste collection, water, wastewater, and then general operating. So we didn't bring back capital today, since I know last week we originally spoke, we may bring back capital today, but I think there's enough in this part of the, anywhere is good there, Councillor Hughley. I think there's enough in this part of the day, the budget, that we don't want to get too bogged down and have an extremely long meeting. Anyway, with that, we'll move on. So just a timeline on where we're at. So obviously we've done the 21st, we're on the 28th. I just spoke what we're gonna do, then we'll come back on the 12th with if there's any changes from today, and then with capital. And then if all is good, we'll still have the public meeting on January 9th, and then budget approval January 23rd. And if that's not the case, if there's a delay for any reason, that's fine. Then the budget approval will take place sometime in early February, which is okay. So kind of the agenda tonight, we'll just a brief couple changes on last meeting, and then we'll get in the waste collection, budget, water, wastewater, and then the operating. And again, there'll be time at the end of each section. I'll turn it back at that point in time for questions. Just to reiterate, when we speak to how much is 1% of the levy, increase or decrease, it equates to $62,740. I said the last meeting that I would try to make the comparisons when I speak to percentages and bring them back to that levy, what it is as a levy, not so much year over year. And I've tried to do that in this presentation. Again, to reiterate, this is more so, I'd probably have this in almost any kind of budget or financial statement or tax presentation, just to reiterate how much the township keeps compared to the other levels. So for residents and people, when they get their tax bill, that really the township has 33 1/3, the county 36.1%, education 21.5%, and policing 9.1%. And I will speak to the big sheets of paper. They are in order of the presentation, and we'll take a second when we get to each section so we're in the right spot. Again, just the financial statement categories. Tonight we're focused on what would come out of property taxation and payment in lieu of taxes, and then user and frontage charges and the revenue off of fees and charges and donations. The capital stuff, the provincial and federal grants, gas tax funding, development charges, that will come back when we speak to capital at a subsequent meeting. The presentation tonight is in these categories. So it will go through general government, protection of persons and property, transportation, environmental services. Now, environmental services, I don't have it segregated out like I do the other ones, just because there's some user paid budgets and we don't, other than water, wastewater, and the waste collection, which would be the first three there, we rely on Ottawa Valley Waste Recovery Center for the bigger part of the other two. But anyway, that's self-explanatory. When we get there, then we'll go through recreation and culture, and then planning and development. So just a quick change to this. So I had made this is the development charge fees. So as per the regulation, and I want to thank our planner for bringing it up to me after the meeting, when I made the change from 2023 to 2024, I took the residential change in the quarterly construction price index. Because the development charges are funding non-residential development, even though it's a little counterintuitive, but because it might be from a residential house or a residential unit, but it's funding non-residential projects, and the regulation states it's the non-residential index, not the residential index. So I originally proposed a 1.2% increase to the development charge. The non-residential, and for non-residential, it was a 7.2. It should be a 7.2 based on that regulation. So I have what that effect would be. And originally it was about $47 per residential unit. If we were to follow the regulation in that price index, it would now be a change of basically $200 per residential unit for the development charge. So it'd be an increase of that. So I just wanted to bring that. I mean, in a couple minutes when I turn it back over for questions, certainly discuss on that, but I made an error in my interpretation of what index to use, but after kind of working through with planner, it seems to make sense. So that's one change from the last meeting. So with that, are there any questions on that piece so far, or concerns or anything?
So is that a flat rate per unit?
Yes, and it'd be for a single detached dwelling unit. The fee is, I think it's 20, my mind goes better on the screen, I guess. It's 2,000, would be 2,986, up from 2,786. And just to confirm it, Lori, that'd be per unit?
Yeah, so that's the single detached rate. So it has the different rates. Your percentage then would scale depending on the rate per the type of dwelling unit, or then again, conversely, when we get to commercial industrial, that's when it's the square footage.
Okay, then I'll move on. I'm seeing nothing else. All right, so the waste collection budget. So that's your first, and these were in order, so that's your first bigger piece of paper. And so what I've done is there are highlights. There are highlights for something that I was bringing your attention to, but I've really tried to sum up most of the big highlights in the presentation. So I've broken them down into between 2023 and 2024. So in 2023, we had the waste collection budget had a total of $837,000. Tipping fees were $290,000. The collection contract was $530,000. We had consultants of $12,500, which then turned out to be $210 per unit was on the tax bill for the waste collection budget, which I'm sure everyone here is familiar with that piece of their tax bill. So in 2024, we have a proposed increase to $889,000. The tipping fees increased from $290 to $310. This is based off of the proposed Ottawa Valley Waste Recovery Center increases to their tipping fees. It looks like from what they sent out, it's about a 5% increase across the board. So what I did was took what we spent to date. Now that brings me to another point. The AVs that you have in front of you on your sheets are of the point in time when I first originally exported this from our financial software. So it's not necessarily up to date today or as of the end of October. What I did is I went in and took where we were at the end of October, divided that by 10, multiplied by 12 to figure out somewhat where we'd be, and then added the 5% to the tipping fees at that point in time. So there is a $20,000 increase there, and that boils down to estimated usage times the 5% increase from Ottawa Valley Waste Recovery Center. The collection contract, it has a 3% increase. Well, it has an increase that is comparable to CPI. So, and that comes into play in January. So last year, the increase was about 6.1%, I think, which was similar to the cost of living allowance that the township used at that point in time for wages. So what I did this year was I took the collection contract and multiplied by 1.3%, because that's what the most current CPI index was. So that's how come that is about a $32,000 increase. The consultants is $12,500, and this would be basically the same as last year, but a share of the joint venture for the new collection contract, and that would be funded from reserves. So because that was budgeted for in 2020, or the same amount was kind of budgeted from in 2023, what we would do at the end of the year is we would take the funds we generated from the fee this year, put into reserve for year end, bring it back from year end, so we're not double charging people for that, so to speak. So where that, what that comes down to, I guess, is the collection fee based on the number of units that we have would need to increase from $210 to $220 to cover the expected operating expenses. And therefore then no tax dollars or tax from the levy would be used to cover any of the waste collection budget, if you will. It would be fully funded by the users that use that service. So that's the end of that budget. So with that, I'll turn it to the table if there's any questions.
Margaret, the new collection contract is 2025, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mayor, the idea was for this year was with Pembroke and Petawawa to do our shared joint contract, but with so many unknowns as part of the Blue Box transition program, we decided to delay and wait until 2024. We're, I think, in a better place now, kind of knowing what's coming from the province and what our responsibilities are. So probably in the first quarter of the new year, we'll start on that new collection contract, which for us will be a collection of organics and garbage only, as the province takes over the collection of the recycling materials. So we still will be in the collection business, just a lot smaller scale than what we have been in recent years.
Thank you.
Okay, so that would conclude that budget. So the next sheet of paper you should have is water. So in 2023, there was a, so let me get my bearings here. So we're talking about the operating part only. In 2023, there was a total operating budget of $672,112. Of that, $47,800 was labor, so salaries, wages, and benefits. Water mains and valves attributed to $15,000. We had water meter contracted service about $7,500. City of Pembroke, $452,826. And then we had a slight transfer to reserves of $17,256. So in 2024, there is a proposed increase to this budget for operating of $718,768. There's a slight increase in labor, up to $53,000. Water mains and valves is $35,000, and the purposes of this is there's some replacement valves at Pembroke Street East, Leach Street, and Elgin Street. So those would need to get done. And then we have water meter calibration that we would need, which would be in the vicinity of $10,000. The City of Pembroke contract, have here budget at $485,000. We know that this was year one of that new agreement. did my best again to kind of go in, where were we to date, prorate that, and bring that into this. So I think we're going to be in around the $480,000, $485,000 that the city of Pembroke contract. So, I mean, for that, and you'll see that again in the wastewater side, those are projections based on the best knowledge that we have. That's not something that, you know, is set in stone, I guess, but that's the best number that I could come up with at this point in time. And then there would still be a transfer to reserves of $15,000. So all that to say, it comes down to what about the rate? Because I think that's what probably people are most concerned about, or would care about when it comes to this type of budget. In 2023, the residential rate was $800. Any unit, whether second, third, fourth unit in a building, was charged $800. Then for the commercial users, there was up to 30,000 gallons was 12.91 per 1,000 gallons, and you can read basically how that tiered down as the usage went up. In 2024, to have a fully funded budget from the users, there's two options for council consideration. I know that some point during this year, with a changeover from how I guess City of Pembroke was billing in the past to the way the Laurentian Valley budgets, there were some users that have multi units, and in some municipalities like the City of Pembroke, they've tiered the first unit is X, the second unit is something less than the first unit, and in the City of Pembroke, actually for the third unit, it's less than the second unit, and then goes that. So from my experience in looking at the City of Pembroke's, at Whitewater and City of Pembroke, it looks like the second unit in some municipalities, 80% of the first unit in a facility. So I wanted to bring that because I know that was a question at one point in time from the mayor this year. So that being said, the two options are for a residential unit, it would be $831. That would be every residential unit. Or the first unit would be $853, and then I only went to the first excess unit. I didn't tier it down after that, but it would be $683. So the important thing here to note is, regardless of what you do with the fee for each unit, it still needs to cover the budget presented. So by tiering back for that second unit, the first units are covering that excess cost. So the theory, I think, and I'm not a water expert and I don't do water studies, the theory is that a house, a single detached dwelling, may use, especially on flat rates, when you're a flat rate system, would likely use more water than maybe a one bedroom apartment or the second unit on a house. So that, I think, is the theory behind it. Laurentian Valley has not adopted something like that before, but I want to bring it to council's consideration, and then to provide direction how you feel and moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor for questions.
So this has come up because a few months ago, a taxpayer come to me saying the City of Pembroke, which we were billing directly before in the old system, he owned a duplex, so first house was getting, we'll say for today, $853, and the second unit within was getting a 20% discount. As Sean has said today, that the city does the same thing. If we're comparing apples and apples and the city's charging for water, I think we should be doing the same thing. There was some issues because of one side of Boundary Road is the city, one side is Laurentian Valley, and the rates at one time were different, and then with the new negotiation and getting the new water agreement, this really didn't come up. But I feel, in my opinion, it's up to council what you want to do, but I would suggest that we do give that second unit and the third unit, if possible, that discount. As Sean says, it does make sense that a house is going to use more than a one bedroom apartment. So we have to decide on that today, and I'm open to more questions, or Sean.
And I'll just add, I guess, just for also consideration is the 15,000. So just looking at the flat rate, the option one, because I didn't go down the rabbit hole with a ton of scenarios on option two, but if the $15,000 was to come out of the transfer to reserves, that 831 could be 811. And then I would have to do a little bit of math on if the 15 was to come out of the transfer to reserves, what that subsequent unit would be, because there's a little bit of algebra that needs to occur for that to happen. But that's also for consideration. I mean, if the 831 to 800 or 853 to 800 is not, if the appetite's not there for that, the $15,000 could come out, because there's a lot of, I guess, with the City of Pembroke contract, if we budgeted at where it is at 485, which is my best guess, if that were to come in under budget within at year end 2024, you can still transfer that excess to reserves. It just means you're not originally budgeting for it, basically. But that would be a way to potentially keep the rate lower if that was what you chose, or if you wanted to put the 15,000 into reserves, then that's fine as well.
Go ahead.
I guess that discussion, I mean, it's been had many ways, different ways. Now, one of the devil's advocate argument to that scenario would be that, just because you have 2 units in one building doesn't mean that population-wise, it could be 2 families of 5, where you got a single family home of a senior, and all of a sudden now they're going to have to subsidize some of the costs for that double unit. There's an argument there. It's not an easy kind of decision, because it's not always, all we're saying, well, there's 2 going into one building. It's still, there's 2 apartments in that building, or 2 living quarters in that building, and depending on the number of people, and we don't have that, we're not metered, so that's the scenario. But that's the argument. The other side of that argument is, right now we charge every unit the same rate, whether it's 2 or 3 in a building. But really it comes down to consumption in the end, and we have no way of monitoring that. So that's the argument to that, right? It's just a matter of, you have a family, 2 families of 5 living in the building, and you have a senior lady or a senior person in another building. Should they be paying the same amount?
And just before you go, the other argument to that is that if you have 2 households side by side and they're both being charged 831, you got a family of 6 in one and a single lady in the next house, then
Same idea.
should she be paid more? They're paying less.
Yeah.
Brian and then Keith.
Just have 2 questions. One is, how many units are we talking about, residential units?
So the total units is about 766. And then there's 96 of those units would be what the excess unit would be.
In that number, right? It's not over and above, it's within the 700.
It's within that. So there's 96 excess units, a total of 766 units as it stands today.
Where I'm going with that is it a deterrent for people to say that they have other units within their dwelling? If they're getting hit up with another $853 or $600, because I'm sure there's lots of places that have extra rental units in them in the municipality that aren't declared, and
I'm sure there is. I think where, and I can't speak to, I guess, the original way that the data was imported into for the water portion of the financial system, but where we would gather that info is from MPAC. So if MPAC came and it was a like they had it as a duplex based on the usage and however that gets from building over to there, that's where we would get that information for that. So I don't know if anybody would self-declare and call and say, hey, by the way, I got a duplex, charge me twice. But we would get that from MPAC at that point in time.
yeah, it's hard to believe there's only 96 other units.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Keith.
If you had 2 semi-detached properties, they're budding, is one called a second unit if it's under the same ownership?
It'd
Or is
have
it 2 separate units?
So if you have it'd be 2 roll numbers. So if there's 2 roll numbers and there were 2 separate parcels of property, there'd be single unit, single unit. If there was one roll number and there was a building and a building, I don't know exactly how that would be treated. My assumption is it would be the two buildings would likely be multis, and that they would come in as property codes of two multis on that same property.
Right, I get it, thanks.
Aren't some of the residents on Boundary Road metered and some are, and across the road they're not, right, Mark?
No, I don't
No?
believe so.
I don't believe that they were metered, but the until the new agreement was in place, the Laurentian Valley residents were paying their water bills directly to the city and the city's rate. So they were paying more, but not that one side was metered. I know the car wash, for example, on Boundary, it would be metered because it was a commercial business, but the residential, they would not. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Maybe just to add to that, so where this is coming from is, as Mark has kind of alluded, there was a section of Boundary Road on our side that the city was billing directly, as opposed to kind of coming through us. Now that's been cured in the sense that all our residents now on whatever side are on Boundary Road, we're billing them directly. And there was a couple of them that had multi-res, and that's where this comes. The rest of, and I'm going to just take a number, say there was 5 or 6 of those that were multi-res on that street that paid the city, and they had that tiered rate, where all the other 90 that Sean is alluding to never had this scenario, never complained about it, always paid single rates. So just putting that out there. It's come because people were getting billed by the city and they had this policy with regards to the rate, and now we've taken it over and they're going back to our scenario, which is one bill, one unit, one bill.
I'm kind of the opinion, as Dean, you've got a duplex that's side by side. Why should one guy get a better rate if he's using the same amount as the other one? I kind of figure that it would be all the same.
Okay. Jennifer?
So technically, water is a utility, so the landlord can charge, like the tenant would have to pay that as a utility bill. So to me, I mean, if it was based on that and the landlord was charging him, then a discount would be good. But I mean, other than that, I don't see the difference.
Just remember that the city is still doing this today. So we're offering something different than what the city is with water.
And I mean, certainly, I know that you're probably seeing this for the first time. So I don't think we need a definitive decision today, but what I can do is I can back out if it would make any, if you have your mind made up, that's fine. I would take the direction and go, but I could back out the 15,000 from reserves and then come up with those two fees, if that is at all weighing or is all a decision factor in what that fee would be. I could certainly do that for the next, when we come back on the 12th. So then at least it's another option for you to consider. But if the consensus is to or to not go down this route, I would take direction today.
And what does 15,000 do to our reserves? What have we got in there now?
I don't have the updated number. I won't probably have that until I go through the whole year-end exercise. I don't think it's going to have a detrimental impact on its 50. Like, it's not as if it's a large portion of money. So I don't have that definitive answer.
Maybe also to give the new councillors, we did go up on our water rates quite a bit in the last 5 years. Our water rates were very small. I think at one time, maybe less than 5 years ago, it might have been $500, Dean. Yeah. So we anticipated the new contract with the city, and we started bumping at $50, $60 a year to get it closer to what the new contract was going to be. I think we're very fortunate, at least the water users are, to me, that the rate is 800 in 2023 and maybe 5 or 6% increase even on the new contract, because we thought it would be a lot more. So to me, I would think the more money goes in the reserves, the better, because we're going to have big water costs down the road. So anything we can get, I in fact was gonna suggest even more money, which more can go into reserves, but if we're not gonna make a decision today, maybe when we get into the reserves in capital, we can take a where we are in the water reserves and decide if you wanna leave it at these rates today and put 15 aside, or if you wanna go higher and put more into reserves. Wendy?
I personally don't think we should remove the reserve piece, because I think even if you start falling a little bit behind, that's not good. So I think you need to have at least 15 in your reserve, if not more.
So does council want to make a decision on the secondary units now? Okay. So all in favor with option 1? 1, 2, and for option 2, it's 3. So 3 to, now we're missing somebody.
I'm unsure. I don't know if I can make a decision today on that piece. I didn't vote either way, because I'm just like, I don't know. But if you need direction today, I'll pick one side or the other. But I just don't feel comfortable making that decision today.
Well, if you're not comfortable today, then we'll
Yeah.
wait till the next meeting. Okay, is that okay, Sean? Okay. Pardon me? Well, I don't know, do we do
Well,
that?
I mean, we don't have an official motion. We're trying to get direction from
Yeah.
council, and the problem is if it was a motion and the council doesn't, then it's against the actual motion. So that's kind of the thing, but right now we're not doing what, we're just trying to get direction. So in this case, we would suggest, I mean, I guess we probably should ask, Councilor Hewitt is asking that, we take a little bit of time. Is everybody in favor of that direction? I mean, go back to that one because obviously she's not comfortable. But again, we're just looking for direction, show of hands, so Sean can bring it back. So is anybody willing to wait for Councilor Hewitt's kind of look at it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, Wendy?
I'm comfortable with however the treasurer thinks we should move forward. That's so this is not my expertise.
Good answer.
No, it's not my expertise, but the one piece that I do feel comfortable with is saying, do not pull back on the reserves.
Yeah.
So just an update on the reserve. I estimated at year end there'll be about $500,000 in that reserve. So
it's a minimal amount going towards it, but whenever we can find.
So I think what I maybe suggest in this case, just because it is an important decision, just give it some thought. Sean will bring it back on the 12th. It'll be a question, are we doing option 1 or option 2 of water? And then he'll have the numbers there too. But if you need any other information between now and then certainly let us know and we'll try and gather that for you.
yeah, so the direction I'll take is as those rates are presented, that's what I'll come back with. It'll just be the determination on
1 or 2.
is it 1 or 2. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, on to wastewater. So in 2023, Laurentian Valley had an operating budget of just over $636,000. Of that, $13,200 was labor, so very, very minimal. There were water mains and valves, contracted services of $15,000. There's the water meter contracted service, $7,500, and then there was again the City of Pembroke rate of $438,953. The proposed operating budget for wastewater in 2024 is just under $685,000. Increase there is some labor at $23,500, just on some of the splits between some public works staff for some of the energy it takes for wastewater. There is an increase for contracted services, again, for the valves, then for the calibration of $10,000, and then estimated that the City of Pembroke rate will be $470,000. So wastewater is a little bit different than water in that it's not a flat rate. It gets billed out in a similar fashion to property taxes, so it's a little bit more complicated. But looking at my best estimation of from 2023 to 2024, and this is based on the residential rate and based on the average assessment of 244,000. The wastewater levy would need to increase $54.67 for that household, which equates to about 8.2%. And again, this would be for to have it fully funded by the user. And I will note that in 2024, part of is to pull from reserves for the debenture payment for the wastewater debenture that's still on the books. So originally when I put this together, I didn't do that, but then speaking with the CAO, that is, I guess, what's happened in the past is there's a debenture that's soon off the books, I think in 2025. So we're pulling from the wastewater reserve, that's $75,000 roughly to pay for that debenture payment. So basically, it makes total sense that it's reserve money to pay for the capital that you're paying every year as opposed to capital in one big shot. So, if that was a question, if we were still doing that, we still are. So that would be the impact there. I'll turn it to the table if there's any questions at that point.
Is that the only debenture versus wastewater? It's going to be done in 2025?
I believe, but I have to turn to maybe Mark if there's any. Is Royce Street that's coming going to be any for wastewater?
Yeah, so it's about probably a third of that project will end up going towards wastewater.
So there'll be a debenture coming for wastewater with the Roy Street project.
And I guess the reason we did that last year, we transferred reserve because of the debenture coming due in 2025. And it's just because right now there's a significant increase with the water and sewer negotiated agreement with the city, that there was an increase, and it was felt that instead of boosting it up tremendously to the ratepayers, that we could, the wastewater reserve is quite healthy as well. So we could transfer some of that just to kind of offset it so we don't spike it up and get it paid. And then, when it comes due, then we have this whole bunch of money going back in the reserve. So this way it kind of softens the increase. And yes, there'll likely be a new debenture go out at the end of 25 probably for the Roy Street project. But also there is a significant amount of reserves there too that probably can offset some of that too as well to pay, so the debenture is not as big as it could be. So that's just a softer way of getting that, eliminating the spike of the increase for the sake of 2 years.
Okay, any questions? So everybody's happy with the wastewater then? Keith?
So what would it boil down to an individual house, like total wastewater cost?
So the total wastewater levy for that house, that would be assessed at $244,000, which is the, I guess, median single family detached.
I see now, yeah.
So it'd be $723.12 versus $668.45.
$55 increase on an average home.
So the wastewater obviously only goes to wastewater users, and we're using the average assessment, but we don't use an average assessment for water.
No, water is flat rate.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, different type of fee structure.
Okay. So make sure. Okay, everybody good with that then? Okay.
Okay, so now the next two packets that you probably have one, I mean, yours might be both stapled actually, but one is revenue, one is expenses. I will do my best to walk through the best I can, but I wouldn't get too bogged down in the spreadsheet because I basically have everything that is highlighted, or most that's highlighted, coming up on the screens. But general government, and again, I spoke about this earlier, that I would break this presentation and the budget down into those categories. General government consists of, if you look at your spreadsheets, it would be council, corporate management, administration, information technology. I have a tiny little thing on reserves, but not the full picture on reserves, but just on the capital reinvestment reserves and the election, and then taxation if you're looking at the revenue side. So in 2023, there were operating expenditures of 200, this is in council, of 214,610. In 2024, we have proposed operating expenses of 242,400, a total of $27,790 increase. There's an increase in the education fees. So as per the bylaw, the council remuneration bylaw, each council member is, and I don't have it offhand with me, but it's approved. They can spend up to X amount of dollars. So apologize, I forget. And then there's a slight increase on wages and benefits. And I will go through the other areas and I'll come back to these if there's discussion, because I'll kind of have it summed up at the end of each section. So under corporate management, this is really, there's some debenture payments. This is the tax sale costs, but there's very minimal stuff that's actually occurring here. But in 2023, there was operating expenses of 48,956. There's a $4,600 increase, and that is a $5,000 line item here for tax and accounts receivable write-off. So at the end of each year, depending on the amount of taxes and accounts receivable outstanding, the auditors, I guess, and management perform a journal entry to increase the allowance for doubtful accounts. So in every year it's increased, and we don't budget anything for that. So what that means is all of a sudden at the end, before we reconcile everything, there's this expense of, could be upwards of $25,000 or whatever it is that year. That basically then is lowering, or it's adding expense, which is lowering our surplus at that time. So I think it's just prudent to have something. It's a pretty nominal amount, but that's what that is. It would just be really budgeting for an allowance for doubtful accounts. On to the next slide, when we look at administration, for that operating budget last year, it was 1.2 million. And it's decreased about $34,000. I just laid out some spots here where we've had some decrease and some increases, but there is a slight decrease in postage because we're trying to move to the online where people will sign up and we'll send out less, and we'll be on top of sending and collecting, so we'll send out less reminders. So we've decreased postage by a very nominal amount. We've decreased our telephone about $4,000 because there's going to a switch that's occurring to NRTC, which we'll see some savings from. There is studies. There was I think $100,000 line item for studies, and we have $20,000 in there. And if you recall, I came to council with the asset management plan is going to need to be adopted, and it passed because technically right now Laurentian Valley is not in compliance. And there was going to be might need some nominal support from outside sources for that. So we have a $20,000 line item there. There's an increase in the janitor fees. That's just based off of the current contract that we have now. And there's a slight increase in some training for staff. Everyone's favorite in the organization, information technology. In 2023, we had an operating budget of our operating expenses of about 83,000 or 84,000. Just based on the increase to the contract we have with OnServe, it's we're estimating about $6,200 increase in that contract that we have with them. And they're who you can thank about your Barracuda. We're almost through general government. So we have the capital reinvestment reserve. In 2023, that it was a transfer of $416,024. There is a policy in place that the township increases the levy. You 1% of the previous year's levy, and then that increase would get transferred to the capital reinvestment reserve. So it's kind of as if it's building over time. So that increase is $62,740, which is the increase of 1% that I spoke to earlier. So that means the total transfer would be $478,764. So that is keeping with the current policy that you have in place. And then general government administration. This is over to the revenue side. So we had an operating budget for revenue of about 1.283 million. We have estimated that it will increase by about $113,000. Where this comes from is we increase the fee for tax certificates. We are estimating the increase to the municipal cost of doing business, which is a very hard line item to budget for, but it appears that it will be the $30,000 increase will be in line with what we can expect. And then we've, based on the interest rates, how they have risen, our investment income has risen. That increase of $70,000 in investment income is for interest earned in our bank account. So we've seen the revenue side of administration increase, which helps offset the expenditures and the levy. So this is I think a good news story here. So how does that play for general government? So with those increases and in everything that I just explained, there'd be a total effect of saving about $46,000, which equates to 0.73 savings in purposes of the levy. So that's what I promised I would do, is try to equate it back to a levy increase or decrease. And that's what the general government, that section of the budget would have. So with that, I can turn it back and we can go, if we want to go through slower each section, then we can certainly do that, but I'll pass it to the mayor.
So what's council's wishes? Do you want to go through each section, and we won't go line item, but if somebody has a question in that section, then we'll.
And maybe just a steer and council, I think the one piece is the education fees. I know in the past, I guess it's been practiced that the township hasn't budgeted for you to use the fees. And I'm not sure if it's in the bylaws called education fees or not.
$5,041 a member is
So
what.
there, and I think I put in the increase with the COLA. So I'm not sure if council would wish me to budget that as per the bylaw, or if that is something that they would want to have less. I'm not sure.
I think because the numbers have been low because of COVID. You know, none of us really went to too many conferences the last few years. Or there wasn't any provided, and if they were, they're online and they're less expensive. I encourage that number to stay there, because I encourage council members to go to conferences. It is a good learning experience. You are limited to, say, $5,000, but that should get you, we generally try and keep that 5,000 number that would get you to 2 conferences. That's the whole idea behind it, but I feel we should leave it there because we haven't been to many in the last few years, and again, I encourage you to go. Absolutely. Yeah.
So what we've discussed, Sean and I, was although, like, if you take the 5,000 roughly and you divide or times it by 7, we really should have a line item of 36,000. But because of the usage over the years, it was always lower than that. Last year we went to 15,000. Currently we're at 9,500. So we upped it, figuring people are kind of more interested in going more. So we put it that we're suggesting 21.4. No, it's 36 in the budget.
It's 36, it's an increase of 21.
That's right, yeah. So I don't know whether you want to bring it down to something a little less than that or leave it at 36. Sorry, I was kind of mistalking there. I thought we were at 21, but we're at 36. So likely, probably everybody won't use their 5, but I mean, it's there and it's part of there in case we decide to go, I guess.
At the end of the year, if it's not used, then it's surplus.
Yeah.
Really. If you take it away, then we're going to limit you guys as to where you want to go. So I think part of being on council is part of going to conferences. So I would recommend we leave it where it is. Okay.
And then really for corporate management, and I guess would be the $5,000 increase for allowance for doubtful accounts. If you didn't want to see that, then we could certainly take it out, but it's a pretty nominal amount, but it's up to you.
It's your recommendation, so we leave it there. Okay.
Administration, I mean, certainly open to any discussion on it. For the study piece, I think the asset management plan support is going to be beneficial. I mean, when we get into, I guess we won't see the fruits of that labor until, I guess, capital budget 2025, but it's something that the municipality needs to have, and we have staff in-house that can get us going, but we're going to need a little expertise in terms of somewhere to go to when we need help. So,
Questions? Sean, the only question I have, and maybe you can clear it up, is under benefits, our salaries are going up $11,000 overall, which I'm confused on that. That's just the salaries for the office administration, right?
yeah, that's the CAO, the treasurer, deputy, most of the deputy treasurer, the deputy clerk, then the office clerk, and the accounts payable, payroll person.
It's not the whole payroll we looked at the other day.
No.
I understand that. So we're taking, the numbers here is 11,000, but our benefits are 36.
Yeah.
How does that relate? Or
I
is
can't
that
speak
benefits
to,
for-
I can't really speak to, I guess, what that 2023 budget number is. What I did is I laid out every type. So what benefits means there is it's CPP, EI, OMERS, WSIB, EHT, and then the Manulife benefits. So I know all of those. So I was able to calculate based on all the staff members in every section, what those will be. And then that's what I came to. So I can't speak to in the past or how that number was derived last year. I don't know, but basically I was able to be knowing because of the proposed salary grid, what those would be. So that's where it came down to. And I will say that just on the actuals, it's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate that I don't have this as of today, but you'd have a better sense of the actual to that budget, and it's more in line with the 2024 budgetary increase there. So.
Okay. Anything else under administration, council?
So I guess for information technology, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. That's the slight increase to the contract with OnServe. That's something that if at some point in time, we feel that if that was to become burdensome, we would look to, and we probably should look to, and at some point in the near future, is go to RFP and just see what services are out there. But as for the contract that we're into, that is what it is.
Sean, with the strategic plan, we don't have any expenses against it. Is that somewhere else or?
No, so strategic plan in here, if you point me to the right direction of where it is in here. Yeah, okay, so we have at the time when I exported this, we had $100 in 2023 there. There are expenses there to date. So I don't have it offhand, but again, it's a timing of when I export. We didn't have anything budgeted there for 2023. So that's why you see the two. And I don't plan on budgeting anything there in 2024 because hopefully we're through that process, very shortly.
Okay.
In the information technology piece, all right, I just went there. Sorry, I just talked about that. I don't think there's any questions. I guess I would assume council wants to continue with the capital reinvestment reserve policy and at least for purposes of right now and see how that shapes up. And then with the increases to the revenue and administration, I mean, I think if there's anything that council would like to see, I know that'd be in your revenue, that'd be the one that's not stapled, but I think we've done I think we've budgeted the best we can, knowing some of the fee increases that we proposed and some of that investment income increase.
Maybe I'll just comment quickly on the capital reinvestment for those that are not sure. So this was something was started probably, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago, where we started with 1% increase and it's been compounded. Now there was a year and possibly 2 that we put 2% just because of where we were at, but it's just compounding on a yearly basis. And you can see it's growing very nicely. It's, $500,000 now, and it's all applied back to capital. And it's only to the resident, it's only a 1% increase that gradually builds that. So it's a great policy. It's working really well, and in the future it'll bear a lot of fruit in the future for sure, and it is now.
Okay. Okay, on to protection of persons and property. So this includes fire, building, policing, lottery, bylaw, emergency management, and animal control. For fire in 2023, for operating expenses, we had budgeted 386,790. And then for fire revenue, we had $75,000, and the $75,000 is the when we bill back it's the permits. And then when it's really driven to by when we bill back for responses. And then 2024, there's an increase of about $18,000. Where those are derived from would be in the tools and equipment. And some of and I will say that speaking with the fire chief, and I know he's at the table, but there's been a lot of heavy lifting on capital, and there's still maybe some capital in 2024, but a lot of it is like more smaller tools and equipment that is likely needed. So we have gloves, hose, siphon jet, some cribbing and tool replacements, an increase of $5,000 in contracted services. This is based on the City of Pembroke ladder agreement, our water rescue agreement, and the extrication agreement. And we only, because we know that the extrication agreement is coming to an end, we only budgeted 2 months of that agreement. So that's what falls under the contracted services. And then we have an increase of $5,000 for training, and that is mainly due to the government mandated testing and training. And we haven't made any adjustment to the $75,000 revenue item. So really I'll sum it up, I guess, in the next couple of slides. We'll come back to fire and go through slower, but I'll show you the big picture of protection of persons and properties, so we have the full picture. In building, in 2023, we had operating expenses of about $182,600 and revenue of $75,000. We're proposing operating expenses of $129,000. So that's a total decrease of expenses of $52,800. The majority of that is made up of wages and benefits, as we have a reduction to the FTE count because of our retirement. And then there's like a slight increase for a convention, or like as you spoke about before, about conferences, convention, et cetera. And then we anticipate a slight increase in revenue as well. So with the decrease to the operating expenses and an increase to revenue, it works out well for the levy. Policing, so this is our contract with the OPP. In 2023, that was $1,350,000. We know this, they've told us what our contract will be in 2024. It's going to be about $10,000 more. Now there will be a reconciliation that occurs, but and it's based on, I think, 2 years ago actuals, and it will come out sometime. I would highly recommend we just budget off of the contract that they've given us. When we get to lottery and bylaw, I put them on the same slide just to shorten the slides up a little bit, but here there's a very slight increase to lottery expenses of $2,100. The revenue, we've increased that to $25,000 because of that comes from the mostly from the bingo license that we have, and that seems to be where where realistically will fall in 2023. So I've increased the revenue there. Bylaw expenses, this has increased about $8,800. And what's important to note here is I've taken some of the chief building official's salary and actually budgeted it to bylaw because he does spend time there, and he has spent time in 2023 there. For thoughts, if you're like, that can't have, that needs a lower. If that was to lower, that would just increase the building salaries on the other. So it would be a net effective zero. And then we have just a slight decrease of bylaw revenue. So all in all here, I mean, it's the big piece here is the increase to lottery revenue. And then emergency management and animal control. Again, I put those on the same slide. Emergency management has operating expenses last year or 2023 of $5,200. Looking to increase that about $9,800, and that is due to $10,000 for emergency response. So we had nothing budgeted in emergency response in 2023. We experience a flood or any type of emergency in the spring. Well, those expenses are coming out of that line item. And when there's nothing budgeted there, it would obviously create a deficit. Now, I think 10,000 here is, I think it's prudent to have. If that doesn't get spent, like if, we don't have any kind of event where we need to use that, it would be my recommendation at year end, we would transfer that to the emergency management reserve. So instead of having it budgeted here to go right into reserve, we'd have it budgeted here to offsetting expenses. If nothing was used, then we would take that in, because ideally with the flood that occurred in 2019, to get any government assistance, you have to spend 3% of your previous year's levy. Well, it's nice to have, and maybe we'll never get there, but it's nice to have something in emergency management reserve so that if that was to occur, you can pull from that reserve to offset to get to that 3% expenditure. So all in all, for protection, persons and property, it's a total effect of a negative $33,000, which is about 0.5% of the levy. And you can see the differences there. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it to you. And if there's any questions, we have staff here that can try and help you in your decisions.
Okay, so we'll start with fire. Any questions on fire? Tim's here. Okay, be careful with your questions. Tim, again, your budget comes in very well, and I congratulate you and your staff for keeping the numbers down and still providing an excellent service.
Well, I have to add, Mr. Mayor, that this wasn't the first go. I had to get him in the hot seat in the office.
Put a hockey stick in his hand and told me to behave.
Then you're happy with the budget, Tim?
Yeah, I think we can make it work. It's just, I mean, in my game, the problem is I can only control so much, but depending on the calls, but no, I think it'll be fun.
Because calls are certainly up this year than they were previous.
Yeah, they're up, but on the other side of the coin, our income is going to be up too, so that should help set it a little bit.
Okay. Questions for Tim on the fire? Okay, seeing none, down to the building section. Questions there? Sorry? What? Oh, yeah. No, I saw him. Yeah.
He got a booted clause out, so he reduced his budget quite a bit, so that was nice.
Okay, if nothing there, policing. Can't do a whole lot about that. Lotteries, is that just because more people are going back?
I don't know. I don't have much experience with the bingo licenses,
No,
so I just
either.
kind of see them, and it must be that people are going back and it's doing well. I don't know if there's, I'm not sure. I can't speak to it, but I mean, that one's one that, maybe if you're more prudent, you'd maybe budget a little bit less in revenue, but I think with the actuals that we've had, I think it would be a disservice to the taxpayer to budget less than we have, so.
Okay, bylaws, anything there, folks? Okay, seeing none. Emergency management. Wendy, please.
Not really a question, just more of a comment. I think it's important to budget for that item so that you can be prepared. So I think that's a good idea to have that budget item there.
For the 10,000?
Yep.
Yep. No, I agree. Okay,
There's animal control, I think, was on that last slide as well.
right. Anything there? Sean, you can keep going. You can pick your departments here.
It's okay, I'll keep going then.
You're not better than I did.
No, okay, so we'll move on then to planning and development. So under planning and development, we have planning, and then we have community and economic development, and then drainage. For planning, The total operating expenses in 2023 was $342,700. Those are budgeted at $365,100, which is an increase of about $22,000. We have the main drivers of this would just be, again, like you spoke to earlier, training and a couple of conventions, and we have a new staff member to the organization that would like to get going to some of this stuff. Then we have the operating revenue of $12,000 for 2023. We increased that based on the user fees that the proposed user fees from last meeting. So really, it's I know for the grand scheme of things, it's only $4,000, but we took how much to date we would have generated if the fees had been what we proposed, and then prorated that for 12 months. And then the transfer from reserve would stay the same, and that's to there's a couple ongoing project. Well, one of them is the CIP, I guess, is in 2023 we budgeted $50,000 expense, $42,274 to come from reserves to cover that. So I did the same in this current budget, just based on where I think the year end will end. And then there's another project, kind of an operational project that will likely carry over and or will carry over. So really, that's the same type of budgets. We're not taxing the taxpayer twice for those things. I think that's it on planning, at least at this point. For community development, we have a slight decrease here, about 10,000. There is a little bit of a decrease in advertising. I think that's more just so closer to actual or planned what events that they've advertised for. You'll see the decrease of $5,000 for the volunteer appreciation. That is not taken out of the budget. That is just moved a section. So it's into the recreation budget. So it's not as if we're just moving it in a spot. So you don't see it here. It'll appear somewhere else. And there's a slight decrease in promotions. And then drainage. This is, again, very small budget here. Now, you'll note that in the sheets that I passed out that there's a large expenditure or expense, and then there's also a large revenue. Well, that has to do with some of the work that was done on municipal drains, and they got billed back to the resident. But where we are at, what we know today, this budget is very, or not changed very much, I guess is the best way to put it. So where that all shapes up, that whole department or that whole section of the budget is a very, very, very nominal increase of about $6,000. So with that, I will turn it to you, Mr. Mayor, and then we have Lori and Nevada here to answer some of the questions if needed.
I guess, council, any questions on this section?
I guess I'm not sure if there's really any big decisions to be made here, other than I would assume the CIP program, that would be something. Maybe, Lori, do you want to speak to the CIP program?
Certainly. Well, as I alluded to at the last council meeting when we had that other request, I will be bringing back a report to council on it because we are at the end of the first kind of term of that CIP, because it was projected to 2023. And, we have seen a slow in the uptick, certainly in terms of applications, but one of the discussions we'll be bringing forward in the new year is whether to look at possibilities of bringing in the affordable housing category for some stimulation there and some options related to that. So, at this point, we're not necessarily recommending changing course, but certainly this next year will be an opportunity to revisit how those funds are being taken up by businesses, because there certainly has been a change, and some other municipalities have noted that as well too. But whether it's just the being involved with other things, trying to deal post-COVID, getting back on their feet, but also just if it's kind of the ones that wanted it for certain works have taken it and done it. And then the other opportunity now will be, looking at affordable housing, which is another push that is out there.
So I think I remember last year in 2022, we only used maybe half the money. So we only had to cost in the other half because we just flowed over the 25,000. But this year it's gonna be all used up, right?
No.
Not all of it.
No, at this point, we only had 3 applications, and we're just sorting out the last application would be to a maximum of $10,000, and there may be some, it may not fully utilize the maximum. That was the one that council approved at the last meeting. Beyond that, there is one other one that I'm trying to pick up the threads from our community development officer on that, again, my understanding there is it may only be more in the 5,000 range, and then I believe the other payout was more in the $6,000 or $7,000 range. So we certainly haven't maxed out this year. Again, a couple of factors. There have been some that have showed some interest, but then not followed through to apply with the paperwork. And again, part of that is an understanding of just maybe attention being in different spots, just with businesses right at this point.
Maybe I can add, just to answer your question there, Bennett. The uptake was really good the first year. We kind of came close to the 50, but since then we have not come close. This year we're probably, like Lori's alluding to, probably 20,000 of it. Although it only costs us 20 to put it back because we take the other 30 and leave it in reserves. So, but there is a thought that council may want to consider if there's some issues at the end of the budget. If you wanted to reduce some of it, then you maybe, instead of going to 50 all the time, maybe we only go to 30. I mean, it's just an option, but right now we're suggesting leaving it at 50, but the uptake doesn't seem to be as popular as the first year. It's just not, people for some reason they're not challenging themselves for it. So it's just an item for thought.
I'm thinking, why not take 20 out now? Or even.
So I guess the decision is about $700 because wherever you bring that down to, you're funding that through reserve. So if you brought it down to 30, you're only bringing 30 from reserve anyway. So it's not as if on the levy, it's going to have a massive impact. What we could do is earmark it when we know what the year end of 2023 is going to be. We'll know what we'll pull out of reserve for that, for those funds. And then we'll know what we have in reserve and we can budget for that amount. So that therefore there's not an effect on the taxpayer. Or you can make a decision to move funds at year end from that reserve to another reserve if you wanted to only, let's say, have 20,000, fund 20 out of it. And if there's 20,000 left in that reserve, you want to put it somewhere else, you could do that as well. But I guess the point I'm making is most of it's being funded from reserve anyway. So it's not that on the bottom line taxpayer, it's going to have that much of an effect.
So the reserves is in that TAP program?
Yes, we've budgeted right now to spend 50, but pull from reserves 42. So we could say, save the 8 or 7,700 or whatever it is, budget for 42, pull from reserve 42. Therefore it's balanced. Nothing's coming from the tax levy to offset that expense. We could do that.
The grant can go towards something else.
So I don't know.
No, I think what's happening here is there's been an expense, I don't know what to date, you're saying 8 has been expended in 2023 or 2023? 8,000 roughly. I'm just going to say whatever. So we wouldn't replenish that, leave whatever's left in the reserve, which is 42 in that case, and then we would save 8 to the budget. I guess.
Yes. So 42 expense, 42 revenue from reserve. And
So we're saving the $8 grand.
$8 grand,
to put
yes.
somewhere else. Okay,
Yes.
that's what I meant.
Yep.
Laurie?
And then I guess just to kind of preview the thought, in terms of what some other municipalities are looking at from that affordable housing perspective, if we were to bring in a category that, for example, some with the second, people are going to add an apartment to a house and then sign on to an agreement to lock that in at an affordable rent category for a period of time, that there might be some stimulation funds from the CIP towards that. That's just one of the kind of options that are possibilities. So that's where, if council wanted to leave a little bit of room in the budget to consider what will bring some options in the new year, it would have to amend the CIP as well, just on affordable housing approaches, if that's also a thought. So that's something that council may want to consider.
Alrighty. Anything else under planning for council?
So next one is community development. This is really just some decreases. There's nothing, the entirety hasn't increased. I spoke to, I guess, the former community development officer today just to get some clarification, and it seems that this would be a fair budget for the successor.
Okay.
Drainage, again, this is very small, so we're not doing it. There may be expenses that we incur for work, but those expenses will be billed back, and because we don't know necessarily what those are today, we're not putting a revenue source, we're not putting an expense. So that's why this is very small. So I don't know if there's much to really discuss on this one, but feel free to chime in if you want. And then that's the end of that section.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. So now into recreation and culture. So recreation and culture is recreation. We have parks, library and culture, but I mean, it's library and festival hall and that type of thing. And then we have grants. Yeah, so if you're looking at your sheets, you got to go now a little bit. We're off the beaten path a bit. We're a bit further down the line. And you're free, I think, and if you're good. If you want to. Sure. Do you want to speak in the?
On the municipal drainage, we didn't put an expense in, but I still do have to take one course for survey in order to get the government grants for drainage works. So I have no idea what that's going to be yet. We've been struggling trying to find someone that offers the course, but there will be a small, I don't know, probably about $2,000 for that. So.
Okay, thank you.
And so now into recreation. So we'll go there. Okay. So recreation, the total operating expenses in 2023 was $387,000. The total operating expenses in 2024 is projected to be, or proposed to be, 500 and just shy of 560,000. So it's an increase of 172,500. 50,000 of the 172,500 is for the active transportation plan. But I will note it's really a net effect of zero because we have an increase of revenue of $50,000 for the grant that we would anticipate getting. So that's not something that's put onto the taxpayer. The remaining increase is I have the rec coordinator. I do have about 10% of the lead operator to recreation, and I guess when I was doing the short strokes on this, 25% of 4 students, basically a student is what it came out to be. I had 25% of 4 the way my spreadsheet, but I was like, well, I guess that's just one. So that's the staffing component there that we budget there. And then that's recreation in a nutshell, I guess. When we get to the parks, I just put this slide to have when you look in your sheets, you'll see these, and I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir, I guess, at this point, but you know what these are, but I just put them out here just in case you want to need a reference. What I decided to do for this slide was to take them and put them all on the same slide, put what the 2023 operating budget was, what we're proposing, the difference, and really the main reason why. So with Forest Lee, very minimal difference, and for property maintenance. Shady Nook, it's a $4,000 increase, and that would be for community gardens and some accessibility projects that need to happen with doors and whatnot so we're compliant. Stafford, it's a $3,000 increase, and that's for water and again accessibility. Allison Fraser is very similar to Shady Nook. It's a $5,600 increase for community gardens and accessibility. Then we have LV skating trail, a very minimal for water, and then Pleasant View, about $1,500 for lawn, $1,500 increase for lawn and net repair. So all of the parks for the kind of like the maintenance side of them, would be about a $15,000 increase over 2023's budget. And I will come back after when we get to the grants, because I think I have 2 slides from now, I have the grants. So then we'll kind of have them all painted in the same picture here. Library and that section, I increased in speaking with the CAO, we increased the total operating expenses just over $7,000. And really that's estimated what we anticipate maybe for the City of Pembroke agreement for the library services. The revenue has stayed the same. So that's the grant that we apply for. We get the funds and then we transfer them to City of Pembroke. So there's no change there. The main change here is a potential increase in that agreement. And then grants to others. Here we had in 2023, the grants to others, just sorry, bear with me. I feel like I'm missing something here that those continue on, but I may need a minute in a second, but the grants to others, these are the groups. These aren't the recreation associations. These are the handy bus. There's listed basically there. In 2023, we had $30,725 budgeted. We have increased or potentially increased it to $34,175. We did hear from the handy bus would like an increase of $5,000. That grant that they've been receiving has been the same since the inception, I think. So they have requested that. So I put it for council's consideration. At the last meeting, when I brought the cross-country trails report, we noted that there was about $9,550 for this kind of general line item, and it wasn't really being used, or at least in 2023, hadn't really used a ton of it. We have decreased that a little bit just to coincide. So the overall increase to grants to others is $3,450. With the associations, and this is, I just got mixed up that I had this on the same slide, so I apologize, but with the associations, it is a total increase to the grants to the recreation associations of $10,000. We proposed a $4,000 increase to the LV for Seasons Trail, $1,000 to Pleasant View Park, and then we have the Fit and Feisty that we didn't have budgeted at all in 2023, budgeted at the $5,000 allotment. And what that does is that brings those grants for the organizations of similar size to basically the same. So when we look at it, that would bring Stafford Park and the Four Seasons Trail to the same grant allotment. And it would bring Fit and Feisty it would bring Fit and Feisty and Pleasant View Park to the same as Forest Lee Park. So it's kind of bringing them all in line to, I guess, how they're categorized or how their sizes are. So for to be equitable. The total change on the budget or effective overall effect is an increase of about $157,000, would equate to 2.51% of the levy, and it's broken down as we went through recreation, parks, library, and then the grants. So with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor or council members for any questions. We also have Mark and Nevada here as well.
Wendy, and then Brian.
So I just want to speak to the handy bus piece. So I was told by the current chair that the grant that they received from us is $12,500, and that's been the same for 30 years. So they're asking the same from the city as well. They're going to be increasing maybe even a little bit more. So I just wanted to clarify that it has been the same for 30 years.
Thanks, Wendy. Brian?
The city is looking for a new library agreement.
Yes.
The budgeted amount is drastically different than what the city is looking for.
I can speak to that maybe first, that I did speak to one of the members on the library board, and he told me to basically don't really look at what the proposed increase was. It'd be much more reasonable than what was on there. I didn't get into any more questions about it. As far as, Dee and I have talked, and CPI seems to be more the idea, and that's what we put it in for. I know we do have a meeting apparently next week to discuss that contract as well as a few other items. So we'll see what happens. But I think we'll have an agreement done before the budget is done. So if we need to come back and adjust this number, we can. That's where we're at.
The number as presented is a 5% increase.
Okay. All right. Betty, please.
I'm just wondering, the same as with handy buses with Allison Fraser, that we've had the same grant allotment for umpteen years. What constitutes them getting, because that basically covers the salary of the maintenance manager. So how do?
Which one are we talking about now, sorry?
Allison Fraser, the grant.
Yes?
The 34,000 has been constant for, so I mean, cost of living for the wage for the groundskeeper goes up, oil and everything else goes up. And so we're just wondering what constitutes, or how do we go about increasing those amounts?
Well, I guess they would have to make a proposal in their budgets. We don't know unless we hear. So if Shady Nook or Allison Fraser or Stafford or whoever can't make it go with the grant they have, they come to council. So in this case, Handy Bus has come and said, we can't keep going the way we are, so we need an increase. It's like any committee, if they see that they can't operate, and then obviously they would show a budget to council saying that they're in the hole, then council would. The number for Allison Fraser only went up, no, was it Shady Nook that went up to Allison Fraser? Yeah. Because to make them equal back, I don't know, was that 5 years ago maybe?
Maybe. I think there was.
But to be fair, Shady Nook doesn't have a groundskeeper either that they're using to keep.
No, I think the discussion, Councillor King, was several years ago, there was an inequity, right? So, and the discussion at the time was, okay, how do we do it? Because Allison Fraser decides to have a groundskeeper and they want to pay the groundskeeper, it shouldn't penalize Shady Nook. They should have the same, because they can have that luxury now. No, I think they've agreed to hire some other people. So it was just putting them in the, council felt at the time that they would be treated kind of based on size and kind of services they deliver. They would get the same. What they do with that money is totally up to them. Agreed that Allison Fraser didn't see an increase at that time. Shady Nook was a lot lower, so they were brought up to Allison Fraser's rate. Now they're both together, and whatever one sees, I would assume the other one would see. Same thing where Stafford fits in with the skating trail. That seems to be them two groupings. Fit Feisty is with the Pleasant View, and so there was kind of 3 levels of parks depending on services provided, and that's, again, council felt just because one has decided to do this doesn't mean they get more money than the other. It was just a matter of what they do with their money is up to them. So that's the way that kind of was structured. Okay.
Yeah, and I also think at that time that Shady Nook was under a lot of pressure with not a full executive, and they're running out of steam with a lot of the volunteers doing work that a paid person could do. And from my understanding, since that's happened, it certainly has turned around for the better for that community. And again, comparing apples and clubs. But for these numbers tonight, to the change in some of them, that's something that staff is bringing forward, not any of the committees, if I'm correct, right? So you're just trying to get a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So if you have any questions or comments on that, now's the time to do it. Well, I suppose you could still come back next meeting too, but certainly if you have any ideas or whatever, it's now's the time to discuss these items as we go through them. Okay, keep it going, Sean.
Okay, we're now transportation. I think this is the last section before, I guess, the final part of it. So are everyone still good? No break or?
Because we're going to be a while, right? An hour?
It's been going fairly well, but.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
There are some sandwiches, Dean said. Dean made them up,
Yes.
so
You want to bring?
take your chances.
Can you bring them in? You'll bring them into the chambers?
Yeah, or just go grab your food, bring it in. Make an exception tonight. We'll take 5 minutes. Want to bring a sandwich in, go ahead. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're back after a short break. Sean, will go into Public Works, please.
Okay, so this is the transportation services section, and in the sections in your papers are Public Works, and then we have storm sewer, which is it'll be labeled as urban and rural storm, street lighting, airport, and then there's a small section on waste management. That technically would be environmental services because all the other environmental services were user pay. I just put it into transportation services piece. When you look at the Public Works, and I'll just bring your attention to the slideshow, there's a lot of different sections here. And so these are all of them. And as you work your way through, I don't know if it's about halfway or 3/4 of the way through, you'll see urban and rural storm. Well, that's not included in this mini section, but all of these different areas are included. And what I try to do is to roll them up basically into, what is the total number for this group, and then compare from year over year, 23 to 24, and then what is the main differences, instead of like drilling down into the 3 or 4 lines in each area. But this is the section you're looking at when you go through your larger sheets of paper. So the operating budget as it stands in 2023 was $2,442,991. As proposed here is $2,776,000. So from bottom line to bottom line is an increase of $333,000. $128,000 of that is labor. Now, what I want to caution on that, and the reason I put it this way is because when you look at your sheet, you're going to see under snowplow labor 0, but then up above the first line items you're going to look at are public work, label Public Works, and it looks like there's a massive increase there. But what I did, because I'm not familiar with what the strategy was to break out how much of Public Works time is going to go to snow plowing, I rolled all the salaries up so that it's everything's included for Public Works is on the first 2 line items of salaries, and I didn't break them out into snow plowing and all the different sections below. So originally, when you first look at it, you're going to say that's a massive increase for salaries. It's a $128,000 increase, but of that $128,000, there's about 20,000 of it, I think 20 some thousand, that is allocated in 2023 to urban and rural storm, but I didn't separate that out yet. So really the effective Public Works salary is about $98,000 increase, the salaries and benefits. And that's part of the increase to the grid, and then the accounting for the wages and benefits. So I just want to draw your attention to that, because I know that would be something that will come back, is how come salaries and wages are so high? As presented right now, it's because I rolled up the other mini sections to have it into one. Another increase that's a driver of this $333,000 increase is contracted services. I will get to that in a subsequent slide on where those are broken down to. And then there's about a $32,000 increase to materials and operating supplies. And then up for that materials and operating supplies in the asphalt section, we have a $15,000 increase. That's just for the asphalt piece alone. And then the remaining increases to materials and operating supplies of $16,900 are spread between all those other mini sections, which is basically the cost of doing business, how some costs have increased. Operating revenue is a decrease of about $28,000 from budget to budget. So as I move into this next slide that speaks to the contracted services, really here I just put in for Public Works, we had 2023 of 8,000, 2024 proposed of 15,000. There's a $7,000 difference. I did that for all of the sections, and as you note, the bottom line total under the difference, the bold, is that 183,000. The driver of the increase is gravel at this point in time. It would be an increase of 110, and pricing is up right now at 75% of what it was in the past. We have the other increases, so the mow and weed spray, the increase of $20,000, that's a proposed added level of service where we would have a mower rental, and that's where that $20,000 comes from. In snowplow, that $10,000 increase, That is the contract for the parking lot, plowing of the parking lot, or the parking lots, I guess. So that's where that is coming in at. And then under vehicles, that 120 to 132, so there's a $12,000 increase. That is for a midlife repaint of one of the trucks and then the float. The under shoulders, I know I'm kind of going up and down here, but third one down from 29,000 to 45, so an increase of 16. That is for additional shouldering and guardrail system repairs. So it as a line item, yes, it is a significant increase, and is really the driver of the increase of this part of the budget. But what we've done is we said where are those increases going. So under tree trim, that $11,000, there's trees that need to be removed, and it costs money to remove trees. So really, when this comes up for discussion, a lot of it will be, I mean, we have Mark and Brad here that can certainly answer the questions better than I have, but they were very diligent in providing reasons for the proposed increases. Parking that for a second, because we'll just get to the end of it and then we'll come back. The other part of Public Works is the storm sewers. So urban and rural, you'll note that that's what they are in their in this big piece of paper. The operating expenditures of 2023 was 217. We're proposing 202, a total decrease of 15. Well, 30 of that is the wages that I spoke to before. So we had that wage increase. We now have that wage decrease here, okay? And then we have an increase of 15,000 in materials and operating supplies. The kind of smaller sections of this would be street lighting, airport, and waste management. Street lighting, we have a decrease, a very small decrease of $2,000 from year over year. Airport, we've increased. I don't know what that is going to be, but it's in line with what the request or levy has been in the last couple of years. So it's a very small, I mean, minuscule increase. I'm not sure if that needs a change or not. Waste management, that's the royalty fees, and there's two lines there. I don't have segregated out here, but the royalties that we get basically. So we've increased those $10,000, just based on actuals that I'm projecting, I guess. And then for the expenses, it's a slight decrease of 15,000. So just to sum everything up, and I know we're going to go back, but to sum it up, what is that effect? The total transportation services, I'll call it, would be a total increase to the budget of 319,000, which represents about 5.1%. So with that, I will rewind because I'm sure there's going to be questions, and I'll go back to this slide. I guess we'll start, and I'll pass that back to the mayor for the table to have questions or discussion.
Let's go right to the gravel. No. Yeah, council. So let's talk about salaries. How you said you're going to explain that. It's all rolled up to 694, an increase of 360 grand. So you've taken out a lot of that from other areas. You said you took out 20 from one area.
So what I did was, because I don't know the split, my experience hasn't been to have everything broken out, you know, weed and mowing and tree trimming and everything else. So in all those sections, we have salaries allocated. I have to do a little more research and talk to the public works manager on what the strategy is on how I know what the cost of salary is going to be from the, or I have an estimated cost from the crew that we have, the full-time equivalent that we have. So I've rolled that number up into the top public works line. I would then speak with the supervisor and manager to say, what percentage of that do you think needs to go to snow plowing? And then I would move it from there down to there. But for the purposes of where I'm at right now, I have it sitting in one line item. But then for comparison purposes of how I got to this $128,000 increase of labor that's on the slide, I've taken the public works salary, add on the next section down, which is asphalt salary, add sweeping salaries, add shoulder salaries. I've added all of those salaries on that slide together and then compared that to what that total line item is in the 2024. And that's that difference of 128. So in that group, or in the group of rolling up all the public works salaries, there's $30,000 of salaries that is related to urban and storm sewer. And that's where on this slide, for urban and storm sewer, there's a decrease of $30,000 because right now that's captured in public works. So I needed to show, if you're walking through this in chunks, you would say, Sean, when I add up all these sections, okay, there's an increase of 128,000, and that is correct. But when you take into consideration urban and rural storm, because again, I don't know the splits, it's a decrease of 30. So that's how the walkthrough in those chunks.
So we're still at $98,000 increase in salaries.
Yes,
And how do we explain that?
that's the increase of cost of living.
One.
That's the increase of that was proposed. That's the math on the increase of the salary grid.
3.1%.
So that number last year would have been like $200,000 if you compared apples and apples? 6% last year? I don't know, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess
No, I'm not asking.
I think one of the main drivers of which we took into account at the last meeting, but when you start to break it out now, where it looks in some areas is because of, I'm including salaries and benefits together. Because it's really, that's the cost of labor. So the township's portion of OMERS, the township's portion of Manulife benefits for the full-time employees. So when I factor all of that in, I think what's a very accurate number on the cost of wages. So the last meeting when I brought the whole organization, and I don't have that in front of me, that was all of salaries and wages all rolled into one line item, basically, council included from one to the other. It's just the way it's breaking down in these sections.
Okay. Council, any questions on, sorry, Betty?
So I noticed on the sheet, so rural storm, urban, so all of those salaries, you've taken those lines out and it's all added into that number, is that correct?
For the 2024?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So when I have a chance to sit with Mark and Brad, I would say, let's come up with the strategy on how you have divvied out, or how we should divvy out, how much of salaries do we think are going to go to snowplowing? Well, if it's 20%, I would take 20% from that top line item and move it down into there. So it'd be a net effect of basically of zero, but it would then get your comparators year over year. I just, at this point in time where we're at, was the whole public works together.
Okay. Brian?
My question was just regard backing up on the mower renting versus buying. When you're talking 20 grand to rent for 3 months versus buying.
Yeah, so we had, when we started within our own department, doing some budgets, we had looked at the option of buying something. There are a few neighboring municipalities that do the lease option. Our thought is there's different heads, there's flail mowers, there's rotary mowers in different styles. So our thought was to rent something for this year, see if that suited the needs, even the further reach than what we have for mowing capabilities now. So instead of being able to reach 10 to 12 feet, this mower will reach 25 feet. So it's basically, edge of road to the fence line. So the idea for this year was just to try something to see if it was a piece of equipment that, before spending probably $250,000 plus on it, and then finding out that maybe it's not that tool we needed. So the thought for this year was just to go the rental process. There's a company that rents all across the province these types of mowers. So the idea was just to try it for this year, see how it worked, and then possibly moving forward in 2025, look at the purchase. But it was just kind of that demo. We're trying it out for this year.
There seems to be a big increase in contracting services across the board, no matter what department we're in. Is that just the cost of doing business today?
It's, yes, and it was interesting because when we did tenders this year, there were some substantial increases, and gravel was one, and that's noted in here, where historically the township was probably $9 to $10 a ton for granular A placed on our roads. That was about $18 this year. Through the pandemic, nothing changed. The prices stayed the same. That was a huge increase. The other was asphalt. We were probably in the range, averaging $90 a ton for asphalt. We were probably $140 a ton this year. So again, about 75% increase. And it's just, I think it's trying to find the skilled labor. The contractors are paying more salaries. The cost of fuel has gone up. The cost of equipment has gone up. And it's finding that that's being more transferred onto us now than what it was before. So there's quite a few things that there's, some eye openers this year. Even under tree removal, we were calling to get trees removed, and 1 or 2 trees was $5,000 or $6,000. It's almost $3,000 a tree when it's involving a crane for hazard trees. It's unbelievable how things have gone up, but that's sort of what that cost of doing business is now. And I don't see it decreasing, not in the near future. So unfortunately, it's having a huge effect on operating, and it'll do the same on the capital, where the contractors, speaking with Brad and I, have already noted that to be expecting at least a couple of % increase next year over some of the prices that were provided this year. So they've already sort of given the heads up that things will be getting more expensive.
Yeah, just for the contract services, it's a lot of money. I'm not talking the salt or the gravel. I just mean every department. It's up 20%, up 30%, up 40%. Wow. Okay. Anything else, council? Comments, questions? No, I guess keep going, Sean.
Okay, so over to this storm sewer, so the storm, I included urban and rural in here, so I'm not sure if there's questions here or not. And then if not, we have street lighting, airport, and waste management. I think I would think is good is that the waste management operating revenue, like those royalty fees, we're projecting a little bit of an increase just to actual. So I think that's something that not all municipalities have. So that is nice that Township has that. I'm not sure if there's other questions on the airport. I don't know if the airport, I think budgeting that is probably sufficient. I mean, if it came in higher or whatever, I can't see it being a substantial amount higher. So I think that's that's for their levy that they would ask us for. If there's any more questions or.
Sean, just a note, maybe I'm just thinking when you said airport, it came to mind. I don't know, do we account for the financing costs that they're paying us on the revenue side? I don't know, and maybe, I don't know, it might be a number we want to look at. See, maybe it's not significant enough.
Yeah, that would be in our investment income from the early on. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Which I think would be wrapped up at this year end for them anyway.
Fair
but.
enough, yeah.
Okay. Well, so that's the operating as it stands presented. So moving forward, so I don't want to, I'm not going to try to confuse anybody. I'm going to try to walk through this slow. So 2023 total levy, so I guess where this comes from is we talked about the levy before, and there's the operating levy, which I would equate to the money you need to raise to keep lights on, to keep salt and sand on the road, to fill potholes, etc. And then you have a portion of the levy, what the taxpayers pay, that goes towards capital replacement, so building a new road, new vehicle, that type of stuff. The total levy in 2023 was $6,273,968. Of that levy, $5.2 million was for operating. So keep the lights on, keep the potholes filled, etc. $416,000 of that went to the capital reinvestment reserve. So you can really say that that's part of your capital levy. We transferred from reserves about $120,000 to cover operating expenses. So not capital, but we transferred from reserve from money that we had collected earlier in previous years to offset some operating. So that, and then what council passed in 2023 and this isn't the total amount of capital investment, but this is the amount of money that's raised from the taxpayer to offset capital purchases or capital projects, was just shy of 200,000. And then council transferred to reserve $513,000, $513,800. And that's why that number comes down to zero. That's how the levy was broken out in 2023. Okay. Then we move to 2024. So you'll note, I still have 2023's levy there because that'll be our starting point. The operating levy as presented, it's about $5.6 million. If you take all those sections that I did at the end of each section, said here's the effect on the levy, it comes very, very close to that 5.6, a little bit of rounding. Capital reinvestment levy, if we continue to increase for that 1%, would now be $478,000. We have right now budgeted $82,000 to come from reserves to offset some operating. That's for the CIP, and there's another project in planning that we pulled from reserves. The capital levy, if that stayed the same, if we wanted to continue to take $196,920 out of the levy for capital, and if we wanted to take $513,800, that is the same amount from 2023, to put into reserves, we would need to increase the levy $441,000, and it's $441,245, which equates to 8.1%. I thought that was the easiest way to explain the financial situation of what we've presented so far.
And maybe just to add to that, the issue here is I know council's gonna look and say, well, we don't know what we want to spend on capital and what we want to put into reserves, but what Sean is trying to do here is just give you an idea. If we stay the same amount out of the levy from capital and reserves, then we're at 8.1%. So it's not really a decision factor today, it's just more of a thought. Keep it in the back of your minds that when we get into capital discussion in the next meeting and the reserve transfers, that you know, you're looking, if you kind of keep at these numbers of last year, it comes to 8.1%. I mean, I guess what's driving some of that is, you know, from last year's operating levy of 5.2, we're currently at 5.6. So we've gone up, and I don't know what that percentage is, Sean. I was 6 or, yeah, I think 6 or so. So that gives you a picture of where we're at. It's not finalized by any stretch, but it's giving you an idea. If we stay the same, these two numbers stay the same as last year, then we're going to be at 8.1 based on what we discussed tonight.
Which is a lot of money.
And again, can we go back and, you know, look at other numbers? Sure we can. I mean, maybe it's going to affect services. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a matter of reducing something. But just giving you an idea. Now, having said that, we've also, in this, you've also got another 1% here going to capital. So that's more than, you know, 62,000 more than you had in 23. So the numbers are good, and, you know, maybe the capital, maybe we don't have to transfer as much to reserve. So that if we reduce those two numbers, then obviously this drops.
And I guess just for previewing capital, which my energy has been mostly focused, I'll be honest, on this. I haven't really done a whole other than just really high level on capital. Would think with gas tax or the CCBF and OCIF, the capital reinvestment reserve, and then if that capital levy would stay same, there's almost like 1.2 million there for capital, and that's not including the 513,800 of transfer to reserves,
Which is not in the budget right now.
No, but it wouldn't increase, that 1.2 would not increase taxes, would not increase that, because gas tax or CCBF we get as a grant, OCIF we get as a grant, and we've accounted for $478,000 of capital reinvestment levy, and we've accounted for basically $200,000 of capital levy. So we're almost at about $1.2 million that I figure we would have for capital. That's without touching the reserves, like transfer out of the reserves. And then we have this 513,800 that we potentially could transfer in. So I guess what the point I'm trying to make is capital is about 1.2 million, I would think, or close, that we have without touching that bottom line number. And then from there, I'm not sure, pass it to you, Dean, to.
No, that's basically, you're right. I mean, it's, again, this is just a snapshot moving forward where we're gonna go in 2 weeks' time. Sean will bring, with the department heads, they'll bring the capital budgets towards us. But knowing that, you know, Sean is saying 1.2 can come from the levy, basically, and then we also have reserves we can draw from, because seeing if we're gonna put 513 in, then we can draw some, certainly a lot out to pay for that capital program. But it's always been a challenge. I mean, there's gonna be some capital numbers that are gonna be big, there's no doubt on it. The road doesn't go very far when you're paying that much for gravel and asphalt. So we'll just have to make those decisions, but it's just giving you a snapshot. But, and we're not, this is only a number, you know, throwing a dart and hitting this number based on what we are from 2023. That's all that is. It means nothing today. Like, it really means nothing. It's just giving you an idea, you know, if we stay to the same capital program as last year and the reserve amount transfers, then we're gonna, you know, and we don't chew up that, then we're gonna be around here. And if that's, and I guess certainly, you know, we as a staff would take direction of council saying, God, we don't want 8, we want 4 or 5. And we had a little chat about that the other day, and people weren't comfortable stating. You're getting an idea where we might be. And again, that is premature because we don't know what the capital program is, but I'm assuming, you know, it's never easy. Capital is costly, roads are falling behind. We all know it's the same argument all the time. But
Keith?
Going along with that, I think the bottom line, once it's all together, is the actual amount per household type thing. The average house is what I go by measuring as opposed to the percentage. Each municipality is different. Some may get a whole lot more for that 1% levy, others get a whole lot less, so.
And it's a good point, Watt, like 8% seemed, oh my God, everybody says 8%. Well, 8% to us only generates probably, you know, 400 and 500,000, between 400 and 500,000. So it's not, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot when you think of 8%. You know, people think, oh my God, you know, whereas, you know, some bigger municipalities will draw 300 with that 1%. So.
It just means that going into the capital end of it, we know the costs are up and we know we're already at 8%. So it's gonna be a tough go, for sure. But we'll wait until we get the whole picture, then you make that final decision or whatever. But yeah, it's not gonna be an easy road.
But I encourage members to go through the sheets that Sean's done. If there's any questions with numbers, or you think there's something, you know, too much or we should be looking at, then certainly, you know, certainly pull it to Sean. I'm sure he'll address it the best he can.
For sure. Okay. Keith?
As we look at this over the next week, can we email Sean and make suggestions, or?
Certainly, yeah.
And you can take and.
Yeah, because I would bring back on the 12th, kind of similar to what I did tonight, was here are some adjustments or changes or whatever from the previous meeting. So it's kind of like, here's an update from what we just met about, et cetera. Now, some of it, I'm sure like some probably won't change, right? But I mean, there's something that, and we'll discuss as staff, and as we get I guess a picture of the capital, but that's where it is as presented today.
So we have one more meeting on the night. I'm sorry, where's your schedule again?
Right there. So the idea would be to bring back the water, and if we hear something tonight, if there was something came out of tonight saying, you know, we recommend this, the idea would be, or I hear feedback in the next couple of weeks, I guess, next week or so, I guess, we would come back with, here's where we are right now before we get into capital. Then we get into capital. Here's what staff is recommending for capital projects and what that effect would be. Council would provide feedback. If we need another meeting, we certainly can meet on the 9th. And meet on the 9th if we needed another discussion point. At some point, to be my recommendation, have a public meeting where we provide the public the opportunity based on a presentation and based on the deliberations if they wanted to speak, so council can hear from them. And then we pass the budget. Like right now we have tentatively January 23rd, but if that's February, like I said earlier, if that's February, it's February. If it's 23rd is 23rd.
It's not gonna make much of a difference of tenders or anything, right, Mark? A couple of weeks? Or Brad? Okay.
No, still sort of that, late January, early February, still pretty early for getting contracts out. And we have Roy Street's our big project for next year, and we've already awarded that. So that one's really ready to go, sometime in May once half loads are off.
Will we see the capital before the meeting?
I will try my best to get you what you need before. We'll do the best we can. I mean, I think this is a lot of heavy lifting because there's a lot of lines. Capital, there's Mark and Brad know, and other managers know already, like have an idea of what roads they want to do or what project they need to have. But this is putting together, trying to tie a lot of things together on every nook and cranny of the municipality. So and for me, every municipality is set up a little bit different. Like Whitewater's chart of accounts is a little bit different. There's different pressures. And this is a learning experience for me too, working through where everything is. Because to be honest with you, there's some line items in there I wouldn't have been able to tell you before this process what was put in there, like what there was meant for, right? So I need to work through that. So, but yeah, we'll have the capital out, I would assume by next Friday. Right? And then, so that would be for no, maybe not next Friday, whatever the Friday is before the 12th.
Okay, Brian?
Just looking at any opportunity or possibility of a place to save some money. The county has Renfrew County Forests on their forest land. My question is there any place in our municipality where there are gravel pits? If the rate's up 75%, we've got a pit right beside Allison Fraser Park. I'm sure that the gravel extends into that. Is there any location in the township where we own lands that we might be able to develop as a pit to draw on ourselves and save some money?
We have to go through a licensing process first, but the one I can think of is Allison Fraser. There is some aggregate there, but my understanding is it's actually underneath the Allison Fraser building. That's the best pocket of material. So if we're building a recreation facility, no, just, kind of kidding, but yeah, I think there is some material there, but understanding is that it's unfortunately where the best aggregate resource is where the structures are.
And we don't have any other lands?
Not within that, no, not within that area. I don't believe, no.
Does the reserve matrix come out with the capital?
Yeah.
There will be reserves come out, but I'll just caution that the year end won't be completed, and so they'll only be as good as what was budgeted. I mean, I will not have reconciled 2023's capital and what's in and out of those by the time, and that's just the nature of the time that the budget gets passed. But I will have as best updated as I can. This is budgeted in, and I'll say I won't pull anything out, but I'll say this is budgeted to come out. So here's kind of a loose. But I can't anticipate that council's desire would be to bring those all down to zero anyway. So it'll be here's a ballpark of where it's at and where I think it'll be at year end. I think that would probably suffice.
Yes. Okay. Anything else, council? Again, good job, Sean. Thank you very much. Very informative.
And just add that December 12th, we're hoping to start at 1:30. So just so members are prepared on the 12th. Now we could adjust that as we got closer. No, I think we'd like to start at 1:30. Okay, and then we'll go back to our normal time. It's just, it is fresher to do it in the daytime. It's just a lot of.
So we still have a meeting on the 5th too, right?
Yeah, that's a normal council meeting.
Yeah.
Our committee meeting is in this case.
Alrighty, thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn.
Wendy and Keith.
Moved by Councillor Hewitt, second by Reeve Watt, that the special council meeting on November 28th be adjourned at 6:35 or 5:35, sorry.
All in favor? Carried.